You can read up here. I'm Andrew. Most of you've seen me from last year or heard of my antics. And we're going to go through, myself and Adam. Adam's going to go through the actual demo itself. And as John sort of started off with, we're doing a live demo using 4G and all the rest of the stuff and facial biometrics. So if you could all please either pray to whatever of the 2,000 deities there are or cross your fingers, really appreciate that. Also, we have Michael Watson from Daon, who will call up a little bit later on to provide some context behind what Daon is seeing in the consumer space around biometrics. Okay, so one of the interesting things that we've been speaking about a lot, and I don't know about anybody else here, I said this last time as well. Last year we're at an identity summit. For 20 years, when you went to an identity summit, it was all about security. The reason to do this was to stop hackers from breaking into our environment. But the messaging has changed a lot. We're talking about opportunity, which is a positive side. I don't know about you, but I'm sick and tired of going to security conferences and people telling me that it's all doom and gloom. If you don't do something, it's all on your head and the CEO is going to go off to jail and all the rest of it, without actually offering an answer or a solution for it. So you'll find that, particularly around the space of the consumer identity and access management, what we're doing here, it's very much about opportunity. It's about interacting with the customer. It's about driving through themes of security, themes of end user experience around business case use cases and driving top line revenue. That's what it's all about. So one of the things we wanted to talk about was we've got all these new channels, or as we heard before, touch points. You would have heard omni-channel or omni-touch point, I guess is the new word for it. And one of the things we wanted to do is go through some examples of how some of these new channels are coming about and how we can secure those in a way so as that we build trust for users to use them. And one of the ones we wanted to go through right now is something that's quite funky and close to my heart because we're actually using my system over here, Alexa, is the Alexa virtual personal assistant. I don't know, has anybody heard of Alexa? Yeah, a lot of people out there. It's actually quite weird given you can't get them in Australia yet. So if you're like me on Kickstarter and everything you want is Bluetooth and online and all the rest of it, I have a Bluetooth toaster. It has an identity, believe it or not. I also have a Bluetooth sous vide thing that, as a single man living in an apartment, it's not a bachelor pad, I actually bake and make really nice steaks as well with that. So with these systems all being connected, we wanted to use this voice environment as the new channel and a way that we can provide security around that. So historically, voice has always been something that was a little bit of a challenge. I don't know if anybody used Dragon speaking stuff and you got 3 or 4 words into it and you went and it put in there and you're like, ooh, I'm not too sure about that, delete it out, didn't quite work. You just found some cheap labor to type it all up for you. Then we went through Mac OS and Windows and we managed to get it to adjust their volume. I remember doing tech support, my first job out of uni about 20 odd years ago. Yes, I am that old. I know I look young, sort of. Through that process, I had a gentleman who was he was a paraplegic, but we were doing support. And he had a voice-activated Windows machine. I was doing modem support for him. And all I heard him do for 90% of the call was yell at his computer for not doing what he wanted it to do. Probably shouldn't have giggled, but it was really funny at the time. Well, it's funny now, not so much at the time for him. Then we moved on. We've got, Google. We've got all these systems whereby we can use Siri. Adam talks about how his children run in when they're asleep and call out, Siri, set alarm for 5 minutes. Is always a fun thing as well, right? Which, from an identity perspective, you really want to know if your children are setting your alarm for you on your behalf. And as we go through, we're getting to sort of this 5th generation where we're bringing these voice personal assistants and Alexa being one of them. Bixby's the new one from Samsung that's coming out as well. And there's some challenges with that. So right now it's more of and this is what we're going to go through, it's more of a toy thing. My kids completely lost it when I decided to take Alexa and use it for this environment here, which means I couldn't touch it for a couple of weeks, which meant they couldn't wake up in the morning and go, Alexa, sing me a song. Alexa, what's the temperature? That type of thing. And I use it a lot for timing when I'm doing my baking at home. But it is one of those tools right now that is a little bit of a novelty, but it's a platform that's going to allow businesses who can take it and build some trust in it to add some value add to it. So the example here is, there's a bunch of skills on Alexa. So as an individual, I can go to Alexa and I can say, and play this game called 20 to 1, or 20 questions. And within, in this case here, 5 odd questions, within 5 minutes, Alexa will ask questions, I'll answer them, and through that pace, in this instance here, was able to identify the obsidian mineral, right? It's a great bit of tool. In my house, as I said, I use a lot. It controls my lights, my stereo, all that sort of stuff. So since it's been here, I've been living in the dark because I've forgotten how to turn on and off lights as we go forward. So seeing it as a channel or a touch point, it's definitely one of those opportunities for organizations. Capital One's doing it now. You can get a Capital One skill for Alexa, and I can get my banking balance off Capital One. Right? So they've deemed that there's a risk. You know, I create a linkage in the back end between my account and my Alexa, and I'm able to ask Alexa through Capital One, please give me my banking details. And she will go off and get that and search it and bring it back. From an omni-channel experience and a customer experience, that's a good thing. I don't mind that at all. But you know what? The main thing about that is that I want to provide that ability to be able to provide the additional services. You know, it was mentioned before by Tim, is that if I'm going to give multiple channels, I need to be able to give the same access, same levels of security, same levels of trust, the same interaction. If I go into a store, if I do it online, I want that. So I don't want to sit there and go, I can only do 95% of what I want to do. If anybody uses the LinkedIn app, it seems to be less, I don't want to use the word secure, but I can link up to more people through the mobile app than the web one without actually having to get the request for it. So I go to that tool set there. The inverse is the case of where I want to use it and I can't get the same functionality, therefore I have to go to the full app itself. So when we start talking about these omni-channel experiences, what we want to do is ensure that we have that same level of trust through that new channel to provide the same level of services for that interaction. Because I said it's a negative experience when you release a new channel, a new mobile app, and the end user has troubles using it, right? That experience type of thing. So spending real money with your voice with Alexa is real easy. Right? You can set it up in such a way that I can say, look, just go order me some dog food, it'll come back with the best price. I say, just go off and purchase it for me. For $50 for dog food, or in the case of a pizza or something of a lower value set, you might be okay with that. But, we're still talking novelty side. It's nice. It's not actually really, really good if you wanted to create a shopping list. Works really well for that. It's great for turning lights and those types of things. I'm not sure I said you want your children to be setting alarms for you at 5 o'clock in the morning, but from a risk perspective, risk to the children, it's quite high of type of thing. That's my parenting style. But from the ability for corporations to use this as a new channel, we need to build a different way to not just accept the fact that that device is assigned to me, that there are other people leveraging it, because these tool sets aren't using voice biometrics by default to identify who's asking the questions. You can get it to say, oh, hey, I want to use a different profile, and it switches over. But anyone who talks to it can say, go off and do something. So to be able to create more value-added services, such as transferring money up to a certain value or paying the bills, paying the credit card off, and they're the demos we're going to do, it's really, really hard to provide those services at a similar level through the other channels, but in such a way that end users are going to use it, right? Because as I said before, you make it too hard, no one's going to use it. You make it too easy without the security, and you're going to either expose yourself, expose the business and the customers, the trust levels around the customers as well. So I wanted to bring this in. One of the things I love doing is when we get these types of conferences, it's really good when there's some news that comes out. All right. So this was one that it's a group identified a way to break into an Alexa. They're a Linux kernel. They found a way to hook in, because they're programmed by just dropping them, and they've got some touch points underneath that you peel a sticker off, and they program it through those touch points. That they could insert a hacked version of Linux in there, and if you spoke to Alexa and said, here's my username and password, it would get that username and password, capture it, right? Which obviously is in itself a risk. It requires you to have physical access to the device, which obviously minimizes the exposure, etc. And from a risk profile perspective, quite low. However, the proof of concept worked. So what we're going to do is talk about ways that we can use out-of-band authentication, things that you're familiar with now. If anybody tries to do a large transaction, maybe logging in through Google Mail and you get it to send you an SMS, those multi-factor, it's an out-of-band channel. You're not actually transferring through the system, so we'll do some of the work to mitigate these types of risks right out there. But these are things that we're having to handle, and all of it comes down to the fact of the technologies out there ahead of the security and the enterprise usage of them. All right. And part of this is, so this was, again, March 14 this year, so it's only a couple months old. Gartner went out and specifically asked the question of, what are your concerns about using voice personal data systems? And the biggest one was around privacy data leakage. Right? I don't know what that device is. And you know what? They're actually doing it correct in the sense of they're not learning your username and password and acting on your behalf or acting as you, impersonating you. So if anybody's out there, utilize things like Pocketbook, great tool, right, out there. Use Expensify or any of those types of claim systems out there. You have the ability to put your credentials in it and it will log in as you, pretend it's you, and download just the things it needs. All right. If you are using that for your banking, just to let you know, you're avoiding your terms and conditions, and if Pocketbook gets breached, you have no coverage. And even the CDO for CommBank said that that's his biggest pain point right now when he's starting to talk around fintechs and providing additional services to those third-party environments. That what Alexa does and a lot of these tools, they actually utilize protocols like OAuth 2, which is a consenting protocol that me as an individual have the ability when I set up the skill to say I consent to the fact that this device is allowed to act on my behalf, not impersonate me. So they're starting to get there. Now we want to go to the next step, which is that whole discussion Alan will have with Eve a bit later on GDPR around more fine-grained consent and not just be able to give consent but revoke it as well. But you know, we need to, as part of these technologies, have the ability not only to know who's asking the Alexa to do stuff, why are they asking it to do it, and ensuring that the associated way that we identified the individual, how we established that credential in the registration was appropriate for the task that they're trying to give, you know, that risk-based. So there's 3 ways. So from a ForgeRock perspective, 3 ways we need to build into these new channels to ensure that they're successful. A, they're secure and all the rest of the stuff, but you know what successful means is that CX experience. I don't know, I'd never seen those numbers before that talked about I think it was Tim, talked about the $3.07, whatever it was, per point per user type scenario. If anybody can't build a business case for building a CIAM platform with it, and you've got those numbers now, there's a bit of a problem there. But to be able to achieve that in those channels, identity and trust is one component that needs to be established. The consistent omni-channel experience, so you don't want to go out there and deploy another app. The consolidation of apps, particularly in banking now, rather than having multiple applications, building them into one obviously makes life a lot better for end users. One way of dealing with things. I use the Westpac app. I would suggest that I need to speak to the Westpac guys because it's got too much in it now. You know, the Qantas scenario of having one place to be able to do all my experience as well. And then, of course, privacy and consent, because as end users are getting a lot more knowledgeable. For some reason in Facebook, we're happy to give everything up because I think we do want to click on and find out which Game of Thrones character we are. I still don't know what that character is that I am. But she wears a nice dress in that. But from a privacy and consent perspective, that we want to ensure that the channels that we're dealing through, because of the value of that data and the value of the transaction we're partaking, that the appropriate controls are in place for me to be able to ensure that you're using my data appropriately. So from an identity, we've banged this on most of the day, that when we talk about identity, it isn't just the user, but the user is an important component of it. But we also want to know the identity, in this case, of the Alexa, the identity of the device. And when I bring Michael up a bit later on, and also what we'll do during Unsummit later on, we'll be talking a lot about the security of the device. So the identity of the device, not just the user on the device, because knowing the device and it having an identity gives us some context that we can apply to ensure that the user has a better experience as well. Why ask for strong multi-factor authentication if I've already got something on that device utilizing really cool protocols like FIDO to ensure that that's a trusted environment that I started with, right? So there's a lot of stuff we can do around with devices and things and services, and being able to, you know, if I know who that individual is, I know how they entered my organization, I know who they authenticated through, I know some more attributes about that individual, then from there I can provide a much better personalized experience for that end user and mitigate some of the risk associated with trust and concerns around that environment. But once I know about them, I can then push them through multiple channels. Spoke before about the Marriott concept of having this big channel. I would love to see us down here in Australia have the ability where I don't have to call multiple business units in the same organisation and be seen and treated as a separate person. The amount of times my superannuation and my banking are all in the same, come from the same service provider, yet when I ring one, I get offered superannuation that I already have with them, right? It would be nice to be able to have that across multiple channels. But as we move from things like bricks and mortar through websites, and we start to get in these virtual personal assistants and the new channels just in general, we need to ensure that. And it was interesting, I think it was Michael put up there about going out there, or it was Tim, going out there and interviewing the end users and asking what they want. Right, it's a really rare thing that I see going out there and actually. And I was working with a bank, and it was very pleasant to see they had actually gone out there and interviewed their end consumer and asked them what they wanted, not what they thought they wanted. Because there's a lot of CX designers out there who have been through university and think they know what people want. Ask the end consumer. In this case here, the virtual personal assistant. There's no use putting out something that people don't want. But more importantly, having the understanding of who that identity is across the channels, and providing that consistent experience, consistent interaction. We use the word frictionless a lot in this space now, but also the services delivered are appropriate to the channel that they're actually coming in through. And then from a privacy and consent perspective, if we are delegating authority to a device, in this case here, or to an application, when we do hit that Facebook page or that application that pops up and says, I want to use Facebook, and then it says, do you want to give this application authority to act on your behalf? You're actually allowing that application access to a lot of your personal data in there. In this case here, when I'm using Alexa, I'm actually saying, and we'll do we're set up already to do this, we've got this application called ForgeRock. And I've set up to the case where I've said, yes, Alexa, I will allow you to act on my behalf to go and do some banking-related data for me, right? That it's really important not to be able to give carte blanche access to that. Or if we don't have the ability to control down to individual transactions in there, we have the ability as an end user to go through and determine what level of assurance, hear about step-up authentication, what do I need to validate that the individual asking for that transaction is who should be doing that. Obviously, we don't want Adam's kids not only setting his alarm at 5 in the morning, but also transferring money into their bank account. Given when we do the demo, you see how much money he's got. He gets way overpaid. All right, so what I want to do is I'm going to pass it over in the demo again. Work with us here from a demo perspective. We're going to go through and do a demo based on the ForgeRock demo platform. Some of you may have seen it before in some of the prior webinars. And through this process here, Adam's going to go through, he's going to do some different logins. You'll see some push authentication come through, utilising the biometric on the mobile phones in there. Once we've gone through that process and set up some sharing and some delegation and some payees and some other bits and pieces, I'm going to invite Michael up. Michael's going to talk to us a little bit about biometrics in the consumer space. And then we're going to have a bit of a play with some facial biometrics, which is always a bit of fun, given we've got that to work with. And then after that, we'll have a little bit of fun with Alexa. And it is my right as your boss to be able to pay out on you.
Yes, I'm just thinking about what his Game of Thrones character really is, and we'll have that discussion later. Well, welcome to ForgeRock. We've been hearing today some recurring themes such as context, privacy and consent, reducing friction, omni-channel. ForgeRock, what it does is a practical implementation that people should be familiar with that brings these concepts together. So if we have a look, the first thing we can do with a banking system is what? Log in, yeah? We could always log in with a username and password, but with ForgeRock, we're going to do things a little bit differently. So what we need to do with this is we need to consider what's the most appropriate way to log in. Now, is it a username and password? Perhaps. But what if the context has suddenly changed and you've detected that session is beginning from a country that you don't particularly trust? So you're now questioning whether or not it's a legitimate connection. So on my, first of all, on my right-hand side here, I've just got a copy here of my iPad screen. So that's actually, in real time, you can see what what I can see with my iPad. So, but it could be a mobile phone, it could be whatever device you particularly want to use. So right now I'm just going to log in. It's going to ask for my password, which is pretty typical. But hey, hang on, it's not going to let me in right now because it's sensed that there's something that it wants to verify, wants to make sure that it is actually me. So this device I've already enrolled in the past, and all I did is put my fingerprint on it, and it should log me straight into ForgeBank. No. We'll try it again, shall we?
So it's live. And just to let you know, Adam, no pressure, mate, given that performance reviews are coming up next week.
No, we're all good.
All right.
Try that one more time. Perhaps it didn't like my fingerprint.
Here we
There
go.
we are. See, it does actually work.
And note the dollars up on the side there, guys.
Yeah, look.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah.
As I'd like to point out, that's actually my credit card balance.
With a negative.
It's, I think my last expense report hasn't been approved yet, so we need to discuss this. So this is a typical internet banking system. You've got accounts. If you click on a particular account, you can see transactions associated with that account. You can add and remove payees that you might want to transfer money to, some investments you may have. And there's this tab called Sharing Consent. Now, everybody has used some form of, I guess everyone here has used some form of online tool that allows for some form of sharing, be it Facebook, Google, apps, Office 365, whatever. And you've got this concept of being able to allow someone else to have access to your particular information, a spreadsheet you're working on, you want to collaborate with, your pictures of your children you only want your immediate family seeing, things like that. So we don't seem to see a lot of that in online services that you're offered from a corporate point of view. So an internet banking service, for example, if I want to share my internet banking my internet banking system with a bookkeeper or with Xero or one of those other financial applications, in some cases, as Andrew said, I've got to violate my terms and conditions of use and allow that person to have organisation to have my password, and they do the screen scraping thing or impersonate me, and that's not particularly good. So the option you have is an option you have is to build this functionality into your apps yourselves, or to adopt an open standard where you can easily expand that ecosystem just by simply showing them an API descriptor, for example. So in this situation, my accountant is going to want to log on and have a look at my account balances and my transactions. So Tom is just going to simply log into his portal.
So this is like your financial services organization.
Yeah, so this is a completely different system, totally separate from ForgeBank. We call it Parsley Connect. It could be anything. And having a name that starts with A means I'm right at the top of all the lists every time, from school roles right up to drop-down menus. I'm just going to select Adam and see what information Adam's shared with me. Right now you can see that pretty much nothing has been shared, but this has actually triggered a sharing request within my portal. And if I refresh this screen, all of a sudden I've got the option here to share information with Tom. I've also got the ability to revoke this information I've shared with Tom. So I may sack poor Tom tomorrow, or not use him next year, or whatever for my taxes. I'd use a different bookkeeper, and all of a sudden I've got full control over who can see what. So back in Tom's screen, as you would expect, I've now got access to transaction details, personal information, investments, everything that was actually shared out using that service. So I revoke, and we should end up back to square one. So right now we've seen the out-of-band authentication just using the Touch ID, using an app that you'd customize or integrate that functionality into your own app, and we've seen that privacy and sharing. So we brought together those concepts of omni-channel and consent. So hand it back over to you for a second.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're just going to flick over the slides over here. I want to invite Michael up. Michael, for those who don't know, has less hair than me, if you didn't know. So that's the reason why he's up here. So Michael comes from Daon. I'll let him introduce himself quickly. And I wanted him to bring Michael up here to provide some real-world context around what we're seeing in the consumer space and the uptake around biometrics, some of the challenges and how to make it work.
Sure, thank you. So first up, Michael Watson from Daon. I look after pre-sales for Australia, New Zealand and Southeast Asia. We've been in Australia for 10 years now, 15 years globally, and we've been working with ForgeRock for about 2 years now and are doing some really cool and exciting stuff, some of which you'll see shortly. So I think you've been hearing all day today that the customer experience is key, and I think that's what Daon finds with the customers that come to work with us, is that they are really focused on the customer experience because they recognize the negative effects on their Net Promoter Score, which you're probably familiar with, but if you're not sure about what that is, it's basically, would you recommend a service to your friends and family? So if you can get somebody recommending a service to friends and family, that's a lot of free advertising, and that's really good for growing your business, growing your customer base. So what really the key is that passwords are just a pain, right? They're one of those red pain points that Tim mentioned earlier this morning. So what you really want to do is try and get rid of passwords, but still to focus on that customer experience, but still have that strong security. So what we do is use PKI to securely and bind the user's device to the user, right? So we're not using shared secrets, any sort of really insecure, terrible approaches like that. We're using strong asymmetric encryption to bind the user's device to their account. And then on top of that, we're adding some biometrics for the convenience. So instead of having to remember what my password is, I can just use my face, my voice, my eyes, my fingerprint, and I can pick that one, right? So that as the consumer, I can say, well, this is the biometric that I'm comfortable with, and I can use that for whichever sort of operations the service provider says that's appropriate. So sometimes the service provider might say, fingerprint's fine for low-value transactions. For other higher-value transactions, we'd prefer you to use a different kind of biometric. So you've got that, both sides of the equation have that choice. And I think also, as Tim mentioned previously, don't build the solution yourself. You really want to look at an open standards-based approach, which is FIDO. So FIDO stands for Fast Identity Online, and it's a standards body that has an approach to doing this biometric authentication and device authentication in a standards way. It's an open standard. Pretty much everybody's on board with it. ForgeRock is as well. So that's really the approach that you want to do, rather than saying, oh, we've got Touch ID. Yeah, but Touch ID only gives you a yes or no on the device. It doesn't let you get that yes or no answer all the way back through to the back end in a nice, secure, and open way. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Michael. So what we wanted to do was, if you want to just stay with us for a second, we're going to go through another demo where Adam's going to go through and give you some ideas around the biometric experience as it is today, based on probably what you might have seen around Face years ago, right? And that's space there. Go for it.
Yeah, so now talking about that concept of trying to make that journey for the customer as frictionless as possible, while maintaining the higher level of security that you're going to be needing. So what Daon have done is integrated their biometric technology into ForgeRock's access management, and so what we're able to do here is demonstrate just how we can log on to our ForgeBank app here. So on the right hand side, you've got just a mobile app that could have been created, and simply we press on the button, say log on with.
I apologise for the face.
Oh dear, yeah, could be scary soon. So once the app comes up, we can then choose the different types of authentication mechanisms that we might want to use. So for example, the first one is a very basic one, just a silent authenticator, and that could be used for low-value transactions or low-risk type of situations where you're only seeing a transactionist, for example, but want to verify that a device is a registered device, so it's connected to a particular person. The second one we'll use is the typical fingerprint. It's a typical fingerprint. I think we're all starting to get pretty used to doing this with our phones now. and and I'm probably now starting to expect the service providers we use to probably integrate into that. And the last one I'm going to use is the funkier one, which is the facial recognition. So I've enrolled my face and into the system. We couldn't get Andrew's to work, unfortunately. It just, I think the reflection on the top, was a problem.
shiny.
So anyway,
Get yours.
and so I click on face. Very straightforward. It asked me to blink. Oh, well, look at that.
That's a
Isn't
shocker.
that a shot? Isn't that awesome? And all of a sudden, I'm able to access ForgeBank. Right. So it's as simple as that. And so that, as I say, increases security for where the context requires it, but also makes sure that customer journey is as frictionless as absolutely possible.
Cool.
So,
Thank you very much, Michael. So
Thank
what I
you.
wanted to also offer, we've still got a couple more minutes. 3 minutes and 8 by the sounds of it. So I just wanted to invite anybody, you now know what Michael looks like. Out there, you'll see the shininess that comes off the top. Just go looking for that. He'll be around for the rest of today, as well as some other Daon people. And for those people who come along to the Unsummit tomorrow, we've got a specific table focused on biometrics and consumer, because I don't know about you, but years ago, I used to work for RSA, so it was very much we didn't like biometrics because we had other things to sell. There was a lot of challenges around biometrics. Someone's going to cut my finger off, and if I forget how do I revoke a finger, and all that sort of stuff. That the world's moved on. There was always the challenge of I can't put a biometric reader out there because of the amount of support around that as well. Everyone's got them on their phones now. It's now coming into the real world. With the lights we've got on in here and the sound and all the bits and pieces for that still to work, just shows that the environmental aspects have been handled with, but also the fact that not only do you have such an ugly mug like this guy over here, but he had to blink to show that he was actually working in that space as well. So feel free to sit down and have as much of a conversation with Michael as you can around FIDO. It is that new standard that's providing not just the end user verification or authenticity of someone who's utilizing a system. We can use it for authentication. There's also transactional verification. So it's just a authentication level that we establish. But also, where was I going with that? It was really great what I was going with that conversation. But to go through it and get that level of authenticity, but also do that step up and contextualize the level of authentication on the system and ensuring the device it's on is also trusted as well. All right. So we're going to do the last one, which is around, I can say her name now because I wanted to introduce to you Alexa. Are you there? Alexa. Hello, Alexa. Oh, you don't, we had that argument, didn't we?
Alexa, tell me a
Why
joke.
was the cat so good at baseball? He always pitched a perfect game.
Oh, yes. That's what my kids do all the time. Yeah, and they do things like, Alexa,
Closer.
sing us a song. No, you don't. All right, there we go. Alexa, cancel. Sorry, having a bit of fun here. All right, so what we wanted to do was... Alexa,
stop.
Stop. Thank you. Children, animals, and that thing. All right, we've got to be careful what we say because she picks it up. All right, so what we want to do is show you, obviously now that Adam can talk, I can talk, anyone can talk, so I'd say please don't scream out the name that shall not be named, all right, out there. But what we're going to do is show some transactional type of integration with that ForgeRock demo. So if we can get the screen back again up here, that'd be great. And Adam's going to go through a use case whereby we're going to use Alexa to be able to access some functions, but also do them in such a way we're using that out-of-band unique requirement around sort of that transactional level. Go for it, mate.
Yeah, so this is just an example of an omni-channel type of implementation. So one of the first things I could do is just simply ask, Alexa, use ForgeBank to tell me my balance.
Your balance is $35,642.22.
Right, so now I can do a little bit more with this thing. I won't name the name. Alexa, transfer $3.
I don't know that one.
I didn't say ForgeBank. Alexa, ask ForgeBank to transfer $3.
I have transferred $3 exactly.
Oh, look at this, look at this, look at the magic.
Refreshing. There we go.
Look at
It did
that.
actually change. Now, Alexa, ask ForgeBank to transfer $100.
Oh, there's your...
I need an approval. Thumbprint.
Please approve the request to complete the
I think you
transfer.
went too quick, mate.
Right. So, Alexa, ask ForgeBank to transfer $100. Okay.
See how that goes.
Approved.
Please approve the request to complete the
That's
transfer.
the demo that works. Anyway.
So it's applying context to the actual transaction and saying, well, this is a bit of a higher risk, and so it's requiring a step-up authentication.
All right. So that's the one that mitigates the challenges with respect to who is it who's behind the query, and being able to allow individuals the ability to validate who they are, contextually define what it is they want to give or delegate Alexa to do on their behalf for a channel service, and then through that process having the ability to contextualize down to what it is that they can do, who can do it for that specific transaction. So with that, we've finished. If you've got any questions, please just chase us down outside. We're there for lunch in the next 2 days, and we will delve deeply into how all this stuff works, how the biometrics works, the back ends. If anybody wants to have a play with Alexa and get her to sing songs and ask the temperature, feel free to have a bit of play with that as well. So thank you very much for your attention.
Yeah.